We shall move to questions without notice. Are there any questions? I give the call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Foodbank's 2025 Hunger Report shockingly reveals that 20% of Australian households are severely food insecure and that parents are skipping meals so that their kids can eat. Commenting on Labor's cost of living measures, Foodbank has said that they, quote, didn't translate to food on the tables. Prime Minister, why are more Australians going hungry under Labor?
Call to the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, the modern Liberal Party is not so much a broad church these days as a temple of doom. They talk everything down each and every day. They vote against every single cost of living measure that we put in place. They argue that opposing tax cuts somehow doesn't make a difference to the capacity of people to get by. They argue that cheaper medicines won't assist people to get the health care that they need. They argue that free TAFE is something that people don't value, to be able to get a job and upskill themselves, because they won't value it. They argue that the creation of over 1 million jobs in just over 8... And the interjection, they do it again, Mr Speaker. They won't learn. They didn't read Dennis Shanahan's comments over the last 24 hours. Because if they did... If they did...
Order. The member for Gippsland. Order. The Leader of the Nationals. We're going to take temperature down, and I want to hear from the Leader of the Opposition on her point of order.
A point of order on relevance, Mr Speaker. Sledges don't feed people.
Order, no.
Can the Prime Minister give a straight answer?
No, resume your seat. That is... I've been trying to deal with this all week in terms of appropriateness of points of order, and I've been more than generous with the Leader of the Opposition and members, and to simply say that that is absolutely unacceptable. Order? No. We just can't have question time descend into this where people just get up and say what they feel like. Order. So I'm just going to counsel the Opposition Leader not to do that again. Okay, the Prime Minister was asked a question about cost of living measures and his policies regarding to food security. So he's going to be. It was a very broad question. I think everyone can agree with that. So the Prime Minister is being directly relevant. No more frivolous points of order. The Prime Minister has the call.
And those opposite haven't learnt. They interjected across, and they don't. If they don't want attention drawn towards the interjections which show their real views, they shouldn't make them. But the question, the interjection from the member opposite, when I spoke about the more than 1 million jobs that have been created, the lowest unemployment rate that we have had of any government in the last 50 years, was to interject government jobs. To interject government jobs, which exposes two things. One, that they don't understand the jobs that have been created in the private sector, and two, confirms their contempt for people who provide service delivery across there, including clearing out the waiting lists in Veterans Affairs that we inherited. People who'd served our nation in uniform, who then were denied their entitlements as a result of the cuts that were made by those opposite. And that's why we remember, Mr Speaker, they went to the election saying they would sack 46,000 public servants. And then they said they were just all in Canberra, ignoring the fact that public servants in Centrelink, in Veterans Affairs, in all of these communities are out there in their electorates as well as these electorates, and particularly in regional Australia, provide such an important role. But of course, the Leader of the Opposition who asked this question was part of a government that ripped $20 million from Food Bank. From Food Bank.
Order.
And then they have the hide to raise Food
concluded.
Bank.
Order. The Treasurer will cease interjecting. The House comes to order. We shall hear from the honourable member for Reid.
My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering on the plan backed by experts to provide cleaner, cheaper and more reliable energy? Why is listening to trusted expert advice important? How does this approach compare to others?
Give a call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank my honourable friend for her question. And, of course, the Albanese government's delivering on a plan for cheaper, more reliable energy for Australians, including 113,267 home batteries that have been installed since the 1st of July, 2.3 gigawatt-hours. And interestingly, Mr Speaker, 9 of the top 10 electorates for cheaper home batteries are below the median weekly wage. So this is support going to those Australians who need it to reduce their energy bills. And, of course, we're also delivering through Solar Sharer our plan to see more Australians be able to access free solar energy in the middle of the day, even if they don't have solar panels and a battery. And all this, Mr Speaker, also is leading to October being the first month in Australian history that we got 50% of our power from renewable energy in the NEM. On average, not for a few minutes, on average. That's how the monthly figures work, on average. Now, this is a plan designed by Australian experts, backed by Australian experts. The CSIRO, AEMO, the Australian Energy Market Corporation, the Australian Energy Regulators, all of whom have told the government repeatedly renewables are the cheapest form of energy and that the biggest threat to reliability in the system is coal-fired power. Now, there is an alternative approach. On Saturday we saw the National Party announce they were scrapping net zero. It will be just a little while before the Liberal Party follows, maybe just a few minutes. Now the leader of the National Party had justification. He called on expert reports and he said Net Zero Australia has said that it will be somewhere between $7 and $9 trillion, and Rainforest Reserve have already made it clear that to go to an all-renewables approach would be $1.382 trillion. So it's quoting Net Zero Australia and Rainforest Reserve. Well, let's have a look at the Leader of the National Party's experts. Net Zero Australia has issued a statement today that says this.
Order.
Different individuals and groups have been misrepresenting key cost estimates from our Australia project as the cost of Australia reaching net zero. These misrepresented costs have typically ranged from $1.5 trillion to $9 trillion. Does that sound familiar? I wonder who they were talking about. Misrepresenting them. And then we've got Rainforest Reserve. Well, they've been quoting a lot of people, and including Rainforest Reserve quoted the Journal of Cleaner Production to support their cases. The publishers of that journal were asked about the references, and they said, and I quote, "These references appear to have been hallucinated and do not exist. We have not found any articles with these titles published in any Elsevier journals." Hallucinations is a common theme, Mr Speaker. We've got the National Party and the Liberal Party following each other to net zero. It'll only be a few minutes before it's announced that the Liberal Party's followed them. The party of Menzies has become the party of Sky News frenzies.
The member for Page. Now, just before we call the Deputy Leader, we had Member for Cook interject 9 times there and the Leader of the Nationals on 11 times. So we're going to give it a break because you've had a good go. Now we're going to hear from the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question goes to the Treasurer. The RBA's forecast shows that if it were to offer any further rate relief, inflation would not get back to the 2.5% target. Noting the national accounts show government consumption still growing faster than household consumption, will the Treasurer admit that with his foot on the accelerator and the Governor's on the brake, he is making it impossible for the RBA to offer further relief?
Give the call to the Treasurer.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Not for the first time the Shadow Treasurer's foot is in his mouth. And the reason for that is because the Reserve Bank made it very clear in the course of coming to its decision earlier in the week that government spending had nothing to do with it. They didn't mention it in the press conference, they didn't mention it in the press release, and when they released their updated forecasts, they downgraded their expectations for public spending in our economy. Now, one of the things that is happening in our economy, I acknowledge that there are a number of challenges, but one of the welcome developments in our economy is that the private sector has been taking over. In fact, over the last 2 or 3 quarters, the private sector has been resuming its rightful role as the primary driver of growth in our economy. In fact, for the last 2 quarters, public demand has made no contribution to growth. And so the Shadow Treasurer really ought to know that, Mr Speaker. Now, in a week where the opposition leader's judgment has been repeatedly called into question, I wanted to say that I think it's a credit to the strategic nous of the Leader of the Opposition to give the Shadow Treasurer a question, because nothing does the Shadow Treasurer's leadership ambitions more harm than to stand him in front of a microphone that's turned on. Because I've already answered this question, Mr Speaker, earlier in the week. And I made it very clear earlier in the week, Mr Speaker. That if he is saying that the budget is the primary determinant of movements in interest rates in our economy, then we've had 3 interest rate cuts this year, including 2 interest rate cuts since the budget I handed down from this dispatch box in March, Mr Speaker. And if he wants to be honest about the view of the Reserve Bank, I encourage him to check out what the Reserve Bank Governor said about the 2 surpluses that we have delivered and the fact that in the 3rd year the deficit is much smaller than we inherited, and because of all of that, debt is much lower as well compared to other countries, and also, I would say, compared to what we inherited from those opposite. So the last point I would make, Mr Speaker, is the Shadow Treasurer is precisely the last person that I will take advice from when it comes to responsible economic management. He is the guy that wanted to borrow hundreds of billions of dollars to build nuclear reactors which would push the price of electricity up, not down.
We'll hear from the honourable member for Bullwinkle.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Resources and Northern Australia. How is the Albanese Labor government supporting Australia's critical minerals sector? Why is reliable energy so important for this sector, and what other proposals have been put forward?
Call to the Minister for Northern Australia and the Minister for Resources.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and I want to thank the member for Bullwinkle for her fine question. She understands that Australia's resources sector is central to the net zero transition, not only of this country but of the world. Speaker, the global clean energy transition simply doesn't happen without Australia's resources and critical minerals, and that's whether it's the solar arrays or wind turbines powering homes and cities around the world, or indeed those powering the resources sector itself. Mr Speaker, the resources sector gets this. They know of the need to support net zero and the reliable energy which it will provide. Take, for instance, Liontown's Kathleen Valley Lithium Project, an underground lithium mine in the northern goldfields, 87% powered by renewable energy. And just next door, nearby to the north, the nearby Bellevue gold mine. That has hit 100% renewable power in an underground gold mine in the northern goldfields. And it has hit net zero power by August just past. That is a remarkable achievement for the resources sector, and it sets a new benchmark of green energy powering this sector in this country. Speaker, the transition to net zero by 2050 represents a once-in-a-generation opportunity for Australia's resources sector, and this government's policies will bring in, and is bringing in, the private capital and investment, creating thousands of new jobs and driving growth in our regions. I am asked, Mr Speaker, about other proposals. Well, of course, there is the proposal to cling to the $600 billion nuclear fantasy that was comprehensively rejected by Australian voters at the last election. They also continue to oppose the production tax credit incentive for critical minerals, and now, of course, they are walking away from net zero altogether. Mr Speaker, to paraphrase one observer from Western Australia, only a mug would walk away from net zero. But if I could quote, the WA leader of the Liberals, Basil Zempilas, in full, only a mug would not heed the lessons of 2 elections back to back and to walk away and suddenly decide, I know best, don't worry about what the election results said. So that was the WA Liberal leader, Basil Zempilas. Now we see in Western Australia, the strongest resources state in this country, clearly a bipartisan support of the Liberals and the Labor government to support net zero. It really is quite a thing that those opposite decide to reject net zero and therefore reject what the resources sector knows is best for this country, what this government on this side has legislated for, while their mad division and chaos will see the Nationals squabble with the Liberals. Obviously the split is coming. We can't wait to see it. Good luck with you on that. Meanwhile, this government will get on with delivering jobs across the regions for this country.
Before I call the honourable member for Kooyong, I'd like to acknowledge a few people and welcome them to the Parliament. Sitting in the Distinguished Visitors Gallery today is the Honourable Leon Bignell, the Speaker of the South Australian House of Assembly. I see former Senator and former Minister, the Honourable Mark Habib, is the Chief Executive of the Australian Olympic Committee in the gallery. And I'm pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today is Mr Gary Ramage, Ramo, as he is affectionately known in the Federal Press Gallery. He's retiring after 19 years as a photographer here at Parliament House and 34 years as one of Australia's leading photojournalists. I understand that Ramo is relocating to Perth to support his 2 younger sisters with cancer. On behalf of all members, I thank you for your service and wish you and your sisters strength and courage. To the call to the member for Ryan. Kooyong.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is for the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, Australian medical research saves lives. It boosts our economy. It improves our domestic security and it provides aid to our region. The Medical Research Future Fund was established to support the sector with $1 billion a year, but your government is spending only $650 million annually. Could you please tell the dozens of medical researchers in the gallery today why it is that you're withholding the support that we committed to and that their sector needs and deserves?
I call to the Minister for Health and Ageing and the Minister for the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and thank you to the Prime Minister for giving me the opportunity to answer the member's question. Can I say, first of all, how much we value your experience and contributions in this place to health policy generally, but particularly the time you're taking to represent and advocate the interests of the Medical Research Institute sector, which has been in the building over the last several days. You and I were both at the Amory dinner the other night with a number of members, at least on this side of the House, and Senator Ruston was there as well. This is a question you've asked before over the last couple of weeks to me and to the Treasurer. Our position hasn't changed. I do want to take the opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to the MRFF. This is an institution of which both sides of the House can be proud. We initiated the process to set it up when we were last in government, and I had ministerial responsibility for this area. To their credit, it was put in place and now has a capital of about $24 billion by the former government. And as you say, as the member says, it distributes about $650 million each and every year. I heard some remarks and a release from the member and a number of the institutes earlier today about the success rate and applicants that had not been able to receive funding from the MRFF. As the member well knows, success rates for all of the government's research funds are well short of 100%. So well short of 100% of good, worthy applicants are actually able to receive funding. And I think actually the MRFF has a success rate above the others. It's about 30%, has been about 30% through the course of its time. The ARC, I think, has a success rate closer to 20%. The MREA from the NHMRC has a success rate of 15%. We'd all like that to be higher, but the MRFF performs pretty well. As the Treasurer said last week, though, I think the government is taking this very seriously. As I said and the Treasurer said, we are pulling together a single, united national health and medical research strategy under the leadership of Rosemary Huxbottle AO, former Secretary of the Finance Department, former Deputy Secretary of the Department of Health. I can't believe the Leader of the Opposition is interjecting about health and medical research, but such is life. And once that strategy is delivered as a final document, and it will be very shortly, we will use that and the 10-year statutory review of the MRFF that the Treasurer and the Minister for Finance recently received and published to consider a range of things, including the matter that the member has now raised a few times in question time over the last couple of weeks and was the subject of quite some advocacy by the Medical Research Institute sector as well.
The call to the honourable member for Menzies.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering on its commitments to the Australian people to make a positive difference to their lives?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Menzies for his question, my favourite ever member for Menzies, I must have said, Mr Speaker. And 6 months on from the election, our Labor government is delivering the plans and policies that the Australian people voted for on May the 3rd. We committed to cut student debt by 20% and we delivered it. We committed to making medicines cheaper and we've delivered that. We expanded paid parental leave and super paid on PPL and we've delivered that as well. We committed to the biggest ever women's health program, including reproductive health, and we have delivered that. We committed to $10,000 bonuses for construction apprentices and paid prac for teachers, nurses, social workers and midwives, and we have delivered that. We committed to enshrine penalty rates into law, protecting weekend and overtime pay, and we have delivered that. We said we'd cut taxes for every single taxpayer. We, of course, delivered that, and we'll top up tax cuts next year and the year after. We committed to the largest investment boost ever in Medicare, tripling the bulk billing incentive, and on Saturday we delivered that. We committed to 50 urgent care clinics going on top of the 87 that we had already opened in our first term, and they are opening right around the country, including one very soon, Mr Speaker, before Parliament comes back in the electorate of Grainler. Mr Speaker, we also committed to ban social media for under-16s so that kids have time to be kids rather than engaging on their devices, to get our youngest Australians offline and into life. And today we're joined in the gallery by a courageous 12-year-old Florence, or Flossie, as she likes to be called, who's here with her mum and a neurologist expert from Hobart in Tasmania. Flossie was good enough to give me this friendship bracelet, and I thank her for it. And I declare it on the register, Mr Speaker, at this time. The work that Florence has done as a young Australian to inspire other children to embrace activities other than being on their devices is quite extraordinary. This is a social change backed by both sides of this parliament that has come from the bottom up. It's come from parents who have lost their sons and daughters, but it's also come from young people like Flossie, who's out there with her peers saying, get engaged in sport, get engaged in music, get engaged in reading, get engaged in communicating with each other in order to benefit your life, not just in the period in which you don't turn until you turn 16, but so that your life is better on the way through, because Flossie has investigated what the neurological impact is of social media and the harm that it does, and is an articulate, inspiring advocate. And on behalf of this parliament, I think everyone in this parliament, I say thank you for the work that you are doing and the leadership you are giving to young Australians. Yeah.
Call to the honourable member for Monash.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. According to Anglicare's 2025 Cost of Living Index, single-parent families on minimum wage are left each week with $1 after covering essential expenses like rent, transport and food. Foodbank's 2025 Hunger Report states that nearly 68% of single-parent households are now going hungry. Prime Minister, in light of these disturbing figures, why are more Australians going hungry under Labor?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for her question. And of course, she is new to this House. It hasn't been here when all of the cuts that have been made by the former government when they were in office, or the pluses that we've moved in of cost of living help that were opposed by her Liberal and National Party colleagues. So I wish the member all the best in encouraging a turnaround in the Liberal Party's position when it comes to assisting people, because all of the measures that we have put in place, whether it be the changes to Medicare, the improvements and cuts to the cost of medicines, the improvements to the minimum wage, the improvements to taxpayers with tax cuts, all of the measures that we have put forward have been opposed by those opposite.
Order.
So we understand that the job of assisting people is never done. That's why we're focused on it. That's why we also point out just the fact that those opposite, when they were in government, ripped $20 million from Foodbank each and every year. And then they interject again. They put it back, they said. So they concede that the cuts were there each and every year, and then they say, oh, well, we put it back. And I'm asked about single parents as well, and one of the things that I'm very proud of is that in our first budget, we changed the single parenting payment so that it applies until the youngest child reaches the age of 14, something that was never done by those opposite. And there's one thing I'm not going to be lectured about by those opposite. It's looking after kids from single-parent families. That is something I'm not going to be lectured by the bunch of people opposite
members on my left.
who've never seen an increase in living standards that they didn't oppose, who just stand up and continue to argue against minimum wage increases, continued to argue about tax cuts, and who are leader of the opposition who gave a speech about the culture of dependency. What do you think that means? That means cuts,
for Education,
more cuts, and even more cuts. And we know that's the case because that's their form.
Order. The call to the honourable member for Banks.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. What is the Albanese Labor government doing to make the most of the global move to cleaner, cheaper and more reliable energy? How does this compare to other approaches?
Give a call to the Treasurer.
Thanks, Speaker. I appreciate the question from the member for Banks, who brings a great deal of experience and expertise and collegiality to our team, and I thank him for his contribution. Now, the key conclusions from the detailed Treasury modelling that we've released are that an orderly transition to cleaner and cheaper, more reliable energy will boost investment, lift living standards and strengthen our economy. That's why it's a golden opportunity for our economy, and that's why it's our policy, Mr Speaker. And a really important part of this is making sure, and a really important part of making our economy more productive as well, is making it easier and faster to build more reliable, renewable energy. That's why our EPBC reforms are good for our environment and good for the economy, because they'll help attract the investment that we need in an orderly energy transformation. Now, the alternative to this is a disorderly transition, which would create investor uncertainty and would cost our economy dearly. The Treasury has made it clear in their modelling document that the only thing worse than a disorderly transition to net zero would be the policy that we think that they have now agreed to, Mr Speaker. The only outcome worse than a disorderly transition would be if we abandon net zero entirely, which is what those opposite are now calling for, Mr Speaker. Abandoning net zero would be economic insanity of the highest order. What they are contemplating over there, Mr Speaker, would be economic extremism of the very worst kind. And what this shows is that their extremism isn't just some kind of phase they're going through, it's now their permanent state, Mr Speaker. That is the most divided, most divisive, most extreme, least credible opposition in memory. But while those opposite are divided, this government and this Prime Minister is delivering. A considered, orderly, responsible transition to cleaner and cheaper, more reliable energy is an important part of our economic plan, and there's a good reason for that. And that's because this will strengthen our economy, it will create more opportunities for more Australians, and that's what this side of the House is all about. And that's because we are a mainstream government, delivering for the people who send us here, and we won't be distracted by the daily madness that we see over there, Mr Speaker. Now, I hear those opposite interjecting, and when I mentioned before economic insanity, the dumbest thing that we could do as a country would be the policy proposal that the Shadow Treasurer took to the last election, which is to spend hundreds of billions of dollars on nuclear reactors, which would push energy prices up, not now. The difference between this side of the House and that side of the House is we are working through these issues in a considered and methodical way to invest more in cleaner and cheaper energy. Those opposites have gone absolutely crazy, and the economy would pay a price as a consequence.
Before I call the member for Moncrieff, I'm pleased to enforce that we've just been joined by, in the gallery, the Australian Auspol 37th delegation from the United States of America. On behalf of the House, a very warm welcome to you all. And give the call to the honourable member for Moncrieff.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Resources. Yesterday, the West Australian Premier, Roger Cook, was wandering around Parliament pleading with every minister who would listen to please, please, please not cave into the Labor left-dominated backbench on the EPBC bills. Will the minister listen to the Premier of her own state or her left-wing backbench?
No. The member for Cornwall. The member for Cornwall will cease interjecting, and the member for Isaacs, the member for Goldstein. Order. The Minister for Employment, just going to, members on my right, I don't want to issue a general warning, but interjections are highly disorderly. I want to hear from the Leader of the House on his point of order.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. Practice makes clear the issues on which ministers can be questioned. Often I raise a point of order because there's one of the things in the list of the question that is out of order. On this occasion, I don't think there is anything in what was just asked that was in order. None of it refers to the responsibilities of the minister. A question about whether someone who has been a member of the left for 40 years as to whether, there is no level on which that question is not bizarre, but there is also no level in which that question is in order.
The member for Chifley will leave the chamber under 94A. Order. The member from Moncrieff is entitled to ask her question to assist the House if she can make it just relevant to the minister's portfolio, and perhaps the piece of legislation she's referring to, maybe it be with approvals or whatever the. All I'm asking is the member to just make it relevant to what the minister is responsible for, rather than a comment. So the member for Moncrieff has the call.
Mr Speaker. Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Resources. Yesterday, the West Australian Premier Roger Cook was wandering around Parliament pleading with every minister who would listen to please, please, please not cave into the Labor left-dominated backbench on the EPBC bills. Will the minister listen to the Premier of our own state about critical minerals or her left-wing backbench here in Canberra?
The minister was asked about critical minerals, so that's fine. She's responsible for order. No, we're not having anyone behave like that. So the member's question is in order. It's a very, very, very broad question, but the minister will be able to answer regarding her portfolio. The minister has the call.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and thank you for that question. It's an interesting one, no doubt about it. And I'm always pleased to be asked about the critical minerals sector of this country. I'm also really pleased to be asked about how Premier Roger Cook and I and this government are on a unique ticket with the development of critical minerals in this country. And those opposite, they can interject all they want. They've referred to unhinged backbenchers. Well, I can tell you where I can see them. I only need to look straight ahead, but you might need to look behind you. Order. So I might then reflect on the backbench of our party, a fine backbench. Each and every single one of these people behind me represent a Labor government that is working for the resources sector of this country, that is working for the critical minerals of this sector of this country, that is working to achieve the legislative drive of this country and this government under this Prime Minister to reach net zero emissions by 2050. Every single one of these people are all working together in the interests of this country, right around the country, whether it be Western Australia or Queensland or every place in between. They know what is good for this country because they work for this country, they listen to their communities, unlike those opposite who just listen to one another. As we well know, all we see in the newspapers from day to day is what the next argument is. And when you come into this chamber and ask me about the critical minerals sector and about the critical minerals strategy of this government, let's have a look at yours. The last time I looked at the critical minerals strategy issued by the opposition when they were in government in 2022, how often do you think it—
The minister will pause. No, the member for Moncrieff is entitled to raise a point of order, and she's not going to be interjected upon.
It is around relevance because the minister was not asked about those on this side. The minister was asked about critical minerals, and the West Australian Premier wandering around begging you all to listen to.
Yeah, as I explained, it was a pretty broad brushstroke. So, if the minister can return to the critical minerals, and she is doing some compare and contrast, but for the remainder of her answer, I don't want her to just specifically talk about opposition policy because she wasn't asked about opposition policy, but she'll be allowed some leniencies because of the nature of the question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. So, as I said before, I am more than happy to speak about critical minerals. And, of course, what we have observed in this place is how important the reforms to the EPBC Act will be for critical minerals and rare earths projects. It will be important for the framework agreement that the Prime Minister signed with President Trump just a couple of weeks ago when we were together in Washington. And it's this Labor government and these backbenchers on this side that are working toward implementing that framework, towards getting an environmental protection legislation that works for the environment, heaven forbid those opposite, but also works for industry and for the community. And what do those opposite do? Well, they do absolutely nothing. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to help the resources sector. They sure don't want to help the environment. So when you go back to your communities, ask them what they think. We will represent your communities because you are clearly not doing it. We will work in the interests of the Australian people while you just vacillate in your division and chaos for as long as you choose.
Order. In the House, Comes to order. We shall hear from the member for Cunningham.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. How is the Albanese Labor government's investment in Medicare urgent care clinics helping Australians to get urgent care when they need it? How do urgent care clinics help strengthen Medicare after a decade of cuts and neglect?
Call to the Minister for... No, the member for Lyne will leave the chamber under 94A. No. She's had a pretty good go this week. Order. Well, it may be Thursday, but everyone's still got to follow the rules. Give the call to the Minister for Health and Ageing and the Minister for Disability and the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Just reminds us, Mr Speaker, the leadership, the front bench of those opposite hate urgent care clinics. Their back bench, though, are very supportive of them, constantly advocating for one, sending us emails, starting up petitions, Mr Speaker. If only their front bench let them get what they want. But I thank the member for Cunningham for her question and for her advocacy for a stronger Medicare in the Illawarra, particularly in Wollongong. She is a fierce advocate for strengthening Medicare, but also, I have to say, a really fierce advocate for better aged care services. She understands the aged care sector incredibly well and is constantly talking to me and to the aged care minister about how we can improve things for her community, and I thank her for that. I also know that she is incredibly appreciative of the record investment in bulk billing. And can I say, in just the last week, the number of bulk billing clinics in her electorate hasn't just doubled, hasn't just tripled, it's quadrupled in a week, in just a week. We've seen a big increase in the neighbouring electorate of Whitlam as well, a big increase in bulk billing for the people of the Illawarra. And she's also a great advocate for the Corrimal Urgent Care Clinic in Wollongong. Already that has seen 30,000 people from her community, all fully bulk billed, getting high-quality urgent care. And she pointed out there was a particularly high-profile patient there recently, the health reporter from the Sydney Morning Herald, who wrote a piece this morning, said, "I thought Albo's urgent care clinics were a waste until I needed one." Until I needed one. And with all of the zeal you would expect from a convert, he then went on to describe a very unfortunate incident where his surfboard went into his foot and cut it quite considerably. On the weekend, he went into the Corrimal Urgent Care Clinic, which he found on his phone, received incredibly high-quality urgent care, completely free of charge. And as I say, I thank him for it. He's written this very fine piece promoting what is a terrific initiative for a stronger Medicare for the whole country. So we have two urgent care clinics in the Illawarra already. 30,000 people through the Corrimal Urgent Care Clinic. 20,000 through the Dapto Urgent Care Clinic in the neighbouring electorate of Whitlam, and rounding it out in the coming couple of weeks, we'll be in a position to announce the provider for the Shell Harbour Urgent Care Clinic in the southern part of the Illawarra as well, Mr Speaker. That's just one of the 50 urgent care clinics we promised across the country at the last election. 3 of them are already open. I'm confident the rest of them will be open over the course of this summer, hopefully as many as possible by Christmas. And once that is done, 2 million people, like the health reporter from the SMH, every single year will get that high-quality urgent care.
Call to the member for Dawson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and my question is to the Prime Minister. When asked about the Prime Minister's promise to reduce power bills by $275, the Labor member for Solomon said, and quote, "How long are you guys going to hang on to that $275 piece?" Prime Minister, are power bills $275 lower now than in May 2022?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for his question. Of course, what we know is that our friend, the member for Hume, had an interesting thing prior to 2022, where he actually intervened to change the law to hide where power prices were. And I'm not sure why he's here, but not here, but I wish him well. Yesterday, of course, they had another quote from the member for Solomon. I don't know how he got onto Sky News, but I congratulate him for squeezing in between all those front benches who have spent day after day, week after week, giving us, I assure you, quotable quotes that are there forever, bagging each other, speaking about how Australia will become a pariah state if they accept the view of those opposite in the National Party and some of the Liberal Party about abolishing net zero, because we have a very clear position when it comes to energy going forward. It is to support the cheapest form of new energy, which is renewables, to then support as well it being backed up by batteries and storage, as well as gas for firming capacity as well.
Order.
That is our position. That is the way forward, not the fantasy that those are indulged in.
Give the call to the order. All right, when the House comes to order, the member for O'Connor will hear from the Chief Government Whip.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Aged Care and Seniors. How is the Albanese Labor government's aged care reforms delivering safer, fairer and more dignified care for older Australians? Why were these reforms so critical?
Give the call to the Minister for Aged Care and the Minister for Seniors.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank my friend, the outstanding member for Lalor, for her question, but more importantly for her outstanding advocacy for older people in the community that we share in Melbourne's West. I was so proud to visit Sunset Views Manor in Tarneit with her over the weekend to meet the wonderful staff who deliver exceptional care to older people in our region. Mr Speaker, on Saturday, Australia turned the page on aged care, taking a once-in-a-generation step forward for older Australians. After 9 long years of neglect under the Liberals, the Albanese Labor government is delivering the reforms older Australians were promised: safer, fairer, more dignified care. The new Aged Care Act and brand new Support at Home program are now in effect, putting the rights of older people at their centre. For the first time, the new Act enshrines in law a statement of rights, guaranteeing that every older Australian has the right to be treated with dignity and respect, to make choices about their own care and to live free from abuse or neglect. Support at Home is a simpler, fairer system that helps more Australians stay in their homes for longer. It means a higher level of care, less red tape and more flexibility for people to get the support they actually need, from help with personal care to home modifications and assistive technology. For people in residential care, we've lifted the bar on safety and quality, with stronger standards, a more powerful regulator and mandatory staffing levels that ensure every resident receives more direct care every single day. These are the reforms the Royal Commission called for. They're reforms that older Australians deserve. And while those opposite spent 9 years failing older people and avoiding this overdue reform, our government has acted. Older Australians have contributed so much to their communities and to our country. They deserve a system that treats them with the respect they've earned over a lifetime. Mr Speaker, from Saturday, that's exactly what Labor has put into place. Real reform, real improvements to the way we care for our loved ones. I'm pleased to inform the House that to date the transition has gone smoothly, including the first tranche of ICT system updates that operationalise aspects of these reforms and that make navigating aged care simpler and smoother. We'll continue to monitor the changes closely to make sure the system is accessible, easy and fair for older Australians to use. Mr Speaker, Labor's reforms are delivering better care, safer, fairer and more dignified for every older Australian for generations to come.
Give a call to the member for McKellar.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Health. The Northern Beaches Hospital in Mackellar has provided both public and private services under a public-private partnership. Following the private operator Healthscope entering receivership in May this year, the announcement that public services would be transitioned to New South Wales Health was indeed very welcome. However, there is great uncertainty about the continuation of the world-class private services delivered there. Minister, what reassurance can you provide my community regarding ongoing access to all the private services at Northern Beaches Hospital?
Call to the Minister for Health and Ageing and the Minister for Disability and the National Disability Insurance Scheme.
Thank you, Speaker, and I acknowledge the member's advocacy for the return of this privatised hospital effectively to public hands. And can I remind the House that no Labor government has privatised hospitals over the last 30 years, while Liberal government after Liberal government around the country has persisted with this failed experiment of privatising public acute care hospitals. The first time I dealt with it was in the northeastern suburbs of Adelaide back in the 1990s when Healthscope, the same company, was given the contract to run the Modbury Hospital. The member for Macon will remember it was a debacle and had to be brought in-house. And we've seen repeat after repeat of this failed Liberal Party experiment to privatise our public acute care hospitals. And we know the Auditor-General's report from New South Wales confirmed that sense of failure. It doesn't integrate properly into the public hospital system. That's what the New South Wales Auditor-General found. And there is a tension between profit and proper clinical care that should not happen in an acute care public hospital. The private hospital system, as the member knows better than most, is very different. It's largely there for planned procedures, and of course, here you go, the Liberal Party seeking to defend failed privatisation experiments, because at the end of the day, like Pavlov's dog, they return to the idea that we should have a privatised model of healthcare. Well, that's not the member's view, it's not the Labor Party's view. I do know, though, that the very hard work the New South Wales Minister for Health is doing here to unwind this privatisation over a relatively short period of time is one that is seeking to reassure, first of all, doctors, nurses and other healthcare staff at that hospital that they'll have jobs and that the clinical services at this hospital will be up to scratch. And I think there's a close process of consultation there. They'll all have jobs offered. Their entitlements will transfer to New South Wales Health if they choose to take up that offer. As the member also knows, the New South Wales Government is consulting closely with clinicians and the community about what private hospital services will continue to be available on that precinct or on that hospital site. And I'm keeping in touch with the New South Wales Minister about that. Obviously, as the member knows, this is all complicated by the fact that Healthscope more broadly, which runs well over 30 hospitals, including Northern Beaches across the country, is now in receivership. So we are taking the lead as the Commonwealth for making sure that there is continuity of service from all of those other Healthscope hospitals. But we took a decision as two governments that New South Wales Health would lead on essentially unwinding arrangements and guaranteeing private and public services on the Northern Beaches side. But if the member wants me to update her and keep representing these issues to New South Wales Minister, of course I'd be more than happy to.
The call to the member for Kennedy.
Minister representing the Special Minister for State. An infamous evil in history, and I quote, advised his movement, repeat a lie continuously, continually and constantly, people will believe it's the truth even though it is a lie. The LNP Townsville are obviously fellow travellers. The Hinchinbrook by-election is the worst lying I've encountered in 25 years in politics. That's saying a lot. The LNP said we support castle law. They've opposed its introduction 3 times. We're not going to abolish coal. They've kept the coal tax, which will abolish coal. 3 mines effectively closed. The LNP said KP candidate Molokino had been Labor. We've the text messages showing the LNP approached him as their first choice candidate for Hinchinbrook. Minister, do we have an avenue to stop flagrant, unconscionable LNP lying?
Well, I'm going to get you to withdraw that last part of the statement because we had this discussion yesterday. We're not going down that path again.
Untruths, Mr. Speaker.
Just withdraw. I withdraw. That's all you need to say.
All right, I withdraw that aspect of the question.
Member. The Minister for Employment, Workplace Relations, representing the Special Minister of State, is a very broad question because you're talking about a state issue. So to make it relevant, the minister will have to make her answer relevant to Commonwealth law, and she won't be able to get much leeway around the state issue because she's not responsible for state issues.
Thank you.
The minister has the call.
Thank you, Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for Kennedy for his question. One thing he did reference in his question was his long and distinguished public service, and I would like to recognise the unveiling of his portrait today, which recognises that 50 years, and I think we can all agree it is a striking portrait at that. But going to the member for Kennedy's question, as the Speaker has rightly pointed out, this is in the jurisdiction of Queensland state law, but I do agree with the member for Kennedy that truthful content in political communication is a genuine issue, and it is an issue that's been examined by this parliament through several avenues. The Joint Standing Committee on the Electoral Matters considered this issue in its last term, resulting in the Special Minister of State introducing legislation for consideration, which contains a model to regulate and govern truth in political ads. There's an open invitation from the Special Minister for State for all members, including for the member for Kennedy and senators, to meet with him to discuss this important reform. We know that regulating paid political communication and, indeed, more broadly, mis- and disinformation is a complex issue, with many members and senators having varied ideas, concerns and views on these types of pieces of legislation. I also note that states and territories are in different stages of legislating this type of content in paid political communication, with my home state of South Australia being one of the most progressed. The Australian Electoral Commission, one of the most trusted Commonwealth agencies who have the primary task of running our federal elections, have made their views clear. The AEC have consistently given evidence that this is not an area of law that should be rushed or approached without careful consideration. This includes, of course, the question of who should be the authority and regulator of the content of truth and opinion. As the Commonwealth, we must consider the constitutionally implied freedom of political communication in any reform. But, of course, member for Kennedy does raise an issue that concerns all elected members of parliament. But I would say one thing that I'm always reminded regularly is the Australian public are not silly. They often can see through these smear campaigns and rhetoric, and I always put trust in the Australian people.
Yeah. Give a call to the honourable member for Moreton.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. How has the work of the Albanese Labor government this fortnight, both at home and abroad, been delivering for Australians, and are there any risks?
Call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the fantastic member for Moreton for her question. Stronger Medicare, cheaper medicines, cutting student debt, protecting penalty rates, building more homes, boosting Australian trade, lifting wages, backing jobs and backing Australian industry, backing our future made in Australia. In the 6 months since the election, we've been focused on delivering the policies that Australians voted for on the 3rd of May. I'm asked about alternatives, and the Liberals and Nationals keep talking about what Australians voted against. They're defined by what they're against because they can't work out what they're for. We talk about Medicare and back Medicare. They attack women's health, including some extraordinary speeches when it comes to Priya's law. We back Australia's interests overseas. They write to politicians in other jurisdictions about Australia's national policies. We support reliable, cheaper energy. They undermine our energy security. We fund housing, public housing, build-to-rent schemes, increased home ownership. They deny there was ever a problem. They didn't need a minister. We work with unions and the business community. They attack workers' rights, but they also treat the Business Council of Australia and the Australian Industry Group and ACCI as somehow the enemy as well, including, of course, the resources sector. That is who they are. That is what they
Tell
believe.
us what they've done in veterans.
We are delivering, they are divided. And when it comes to, I get an interjection again, come in spinner, Mr Speaker, about veterans. The mess that we had to fix as a result of their neglect and sacking of public servants, and then they went to the last election saying they would sack another 46,000, and then they give speeches about culture of dependency, which means cuts to jobs, cuts to welfare, cuts to support for people, cuts to pensions and services. Mr Speaker, we are delivering. They are divided, divisive and despairing. They only have two settings, Mr Speaker, talking Australia down and dragging each other down. We're building Australia's future. They're afraid of it. And on that note, Mr Speaker, I ask that further questions be placed on the notice paper.